Hello, I'll be speaking about the Heart Sutra and seeing what comes up, and I've already gone into it many times, so here I am. So it's a text that is both helping people to reach enlightenment on a Buddhist path, but it also is helping very devout Buddhist spiritual seekers to respect worldliness, to not get carried away, to not get too extreme on their spiritual path, because um, once you go too deep with certain views, certain extremes, certain dualities, then it also affects your balance. It also affects your tightness. So, for example, there's a Zen story about a person that I can't remember everything in the story, but it's something like a person goes and meditates in the hills for many days because they're trying to learn meditation, and then they can't do it because they're too uptight about it, and then later they are very relaxed and have a very gentle view and stop doing it. And basically the moral of the story is you should be like an archer. You should not be too tight and not too uh, loose. But when the mind becomes too tight and rigid with these spiritual ideas, with these Buddhist ideas about emptiness, it can also interfere with the practice, and also it has issues with helping others when you get carried away with this. So people chant it as a text, as a chanting thing, is specifically, but it's also um, you can just think of one passage and try and go into it. For example, there is a section that says, "There is no wisdom, there is no attainment, and there is nothing to attain." So when it says there is no wisdom, what it means is there is no individual, specific, permanent, separate thing called wisdom. Because if a person is too much focused on wisdom, then they actually become separated from everything, because they're too much in the duality of what is wisdom and what is not wisdom, what is purity and what is not purity. So in the same way, there is no attainment, there is nothing to attain. If a person becomes too attached to the idea of attainment, then they are blocked from oneness, because they are too focused on the mental idea of attainment, and it causes lots of dualities in them to appear. So there's another phrase the Buddha says, something like, if I had said that I have reached perfect, excelled, no, actually, I'm not going to say this because it doesn't feel right as I speak it. I'm checking in and it doesn't really feel right to say, but basically, there is no independent separate thing called wisdom, there is no separate independent thing called attainment, and there is nothing permanent, individual, isolated called something to attain. So when you are too attached to these ideas, it can cause like a rigidity, and you're no longer loose, you're imbalanced, and your energies become imbalanced. And it's the same with another idea. I'm just going to put one more idea because there's so many, it's actually quite complicated. So, if you say there is no ignorance, there is no consequences of ignorance, and there is no extinction of ignorance. When I say there is no, it means there is no separate individual thing called ignorance, because nothing can be isolated completely. But if as soon as you say that, it also becomes a duality because yes, there are ignorances. Like if I say the sky is green, that is a little bit ignorant. But if you're too attached to the idea of ignorance, it can block you because you're ignoring the ignorance inside of you and you're rejecting the ignorance in everyone else and you're becoming too separate from this energy. So if you say there is no separate individual thing called ignorance, then it relaxes you a bit because you're no longer um, putting things into categories of spiritual and pure and holy and impure. And in the same way, if you say there is no consequences of ignorance, there's a little bit of a relaxation because you're no longer uh, focused on the problems with people who are ignorant and no longer focused on the issues with ignorance. And there is no extinction, there is no individual separate thing called the extinction of ignorance. So when your mind is like focused on permanently eradicating ignorance, but in actuality, there is no separate permanent thing called the extinction of ignorance. So your mind relaxes a bit because you're no longer tense about all these possible things. So I've gone into just two of the lines because there's so many things in this text that saying it right now it might be too much, and that's just how I feel like talking about it right now. So yeah, this is some vague thoughts about the Heart Sutra. It's a short text. I'll play the didgeridoo for 10 minutes or so to this text, and you can research it in your own time. Um, that's how I'll share about the Heart Sutra.